So just as the announcer was talking about, this is the 30th anniversary of the Reproductive Justice Movement that was started by these 12 powerful Black women who understood that we needed to create a blueprint that gave us the ability to really think broadly and innovatively about the ways that we think about our reproductive lives and sexual freedom in this country. Now, as we all know, Black communities bear the brunt of harm when attacks are made on our rights. And we continuously see these attacks that are happening at our federal level, our state level, and it is something that we have to take extremely seriously. We see it with the rising maternal mortality rates. We see it with the overturn of Roe v. Wade. And from your perspective, I want to give this first question to the panelists. From you all's perspective, how do we use culture? And why is it important to use culture in the ways that you all do, very specifically across all of your disciplines, to really change and meet the moment of organizing for our communities in this moment? I want to start with that just to get us set today. So would you like to start for us, DeWanda?
Sure. I think part of it is really, sometimes you have to take the garment apart to put it back together. And there's so much conditioning I've always found, since, She's Gotta Have It came out in 2017. And even before that, I'm very pro-ho, very pro-sex stories, very pro, really, honestly, just Black women being centered as objects of desire. And part of what that means has been rehabilitating our relationship with our sexuality vis-a-vis these stereotypes that we've been, fed, right? And they talk about the Jezebel, aren't you afraid of being over-sexualized? And I'm like, well, what story are we telling? Are we telling the story where we're not the center of affection, or are we afraid of being over-sexualized? So really for me, it becomes a matter of destigmatizing sex in the Black community in every way, Black queer community, in the Black community overall, and really coming at it, from our own terms, from a place that's devoid of the lens of white supremacy and more about well, what the fuck do we want and what feels good?
Right. Yeah, absolutely. Dominque, what about you?
I think it's important to look at that cultural space because culture is data. And I think depending on the identities you carry, we know that there's not data that really reflects our true lived experience. But when we focus on culture, especially Black culture, it's unequivocal data. It lives in all of us. It's passed on to us through generations, and it's powerful science to focus on.
I think it's a matter of taking every available platform that we have to reframe how we think about sex and sexuality. It's important that it's in our art, that we're seen as Black women as objects of desire and people who are capable of desire. I think it's important that in our personal lives, all of us are content creators now, thanks to social media, right? So that we're using those spaces to have these conversations, to talk about not just the attacks on our bodies, but the attacks on our autonomy, the attacks on the idea that we deserve to be sexual, that we deserve to be liberated.
And I'll just add to that. I agree with everything you all said and thinking about that lived experience as the best evidence we could have. And so with our culture, we hear it all the time that representation matters. So having representations of various cultural experiences, that lived experience as evidence is something that will help reduce shame and stigma associated with our sexuality.
I think, culture... There's a culture, speaking of culture, I would say there's a culture in this country of not talking about sex, politics, and religion. There's a time and place for that. But those are the areas where we reveal our true values and how we care for each other in our most vulnerable states, right? It's where we really reveal, when you boil everything down, what we believe and how we're going to make decisions. And I think there's an intentional suppression of that. I think there's an intentional redirection to things that are more trivial or that are more helpful toward keeping the status quo and keeping harmful practices. And we have a culture, the American culture, I know, and whatever y'all want to talk about, is abusive and violent and oppressive. And I think that we have to confront that head on and stop playing the game of like, this is what decorum is and what we've been taught, and say that we deserve the power to have a healthy life. And we deserve the power to be able to determine what that life is going to be and how we go about it, especially in our communities, because we've been targeted so much. And I'm from Texas. I'm from Texas. And Texas is ground zero right now. I've got 25 nephews and nieces, and I know that, you know, we're talking about Black maternal mortality rate in Texas is, I mean, we're talking about ground zero. I'm scared of how that's going to affect my folks. Yeah, and you know, there's so many other statistics in terms of how many Black trans women are killed and how many, like, it's not an accident or a coincidence that the government is run like it is in Texas, and that's the effect in the statistics that are popping up with our people.
It's a direct correlation, right? All of those things work together. And that is really at the epitome of what reproductive justice is, right? It is about being able to make our own decisions about our bodies and our families and our futures. And so just too often, when we think about this Black liberation struggle that we are in, when we think about really trying to create the world where we are all able to live free and to thrive, so many times this conversation around our sex and sexuality and all of the things that we need for our bodies to also feel not only pleasure but also safe gets put to the side, right, in this conversation too often. So we're diving right in, good people, to make sure that we're talking about this and centralizing this. Dr. Tanya Bass, I want to come back to you for just a second, right, because you are an expert on this panel, in particular when it comes to talking about sex, because it's what you do every single day. So in general, sex is a topic steeped in taboo and shame, but for Black women in particular, who are often hypersexualized, we see this in the culture far too often. Where did the courage come from for you to own your own voice, to speak up about sex, pleasure, and education and equity as a Black woman from the South in particular, right?
Absolutely. And I have to say, from the South by way of Brooklyn, New York, big ups.
Okay, we'll take it.
But I really would say I give honor to my mother. When I think about even the RJ story of my life, it started at my conception. She was unable to continue to the process of entering into nursing school because they found out she was pregnant with me. And so having stories around liberation and standing in my truth from my mother and my grandmother is what allowed me to get here. But also I think about, we're talking about media. I'm on the stage with actors and actresses, and I'm thinking about how shows like Good Times, I can think about all three of the women characters that resonated, Thelma, Walona, and Florida, and thinking about how that showed me what, for me anyway, being a Black woman was and what my Black sexuality looked like. So just multiple things, but starting right there in my home.
I like that. And so that doesn't happen for everybody, right? So I'm grateful that you had a community that allowed that to be a space where you could really explore that for yourself. And we need to really shift that culture so that more households look like that for more people. Dominque, I want to come to you for a moment, right? You are doing powerful transformative work, and in particular, helping the broader masses to understand the importance of this connection between our trans sisters and our cisgendered sisters, right? And why it's important for us to actually bridge that gap and to build stronger relationships to really understand what it means for true sisterhood to occur. And it's important to think about how that's also connected to our sexual and reproductive lives and what's needed in the trans community right now. What do you feel are some of the most important things that we need to be talking about, or what are we not talking about that we should be talking about right now?
I think the real fight for freedom and joy that we have as Black women, period, is a universal truth.
Absolutely.
That we can anchor ourselves in the face of the unknowns. I think there's this perception that trans folks understand all the things about transness. It's an everyday journey. And so, yes, there's some information we have, but there are moments that I can be sitting there with a cisgender person and me having the same question about what it means. And so I think the call to action is to focus on what we know, not what we don't know. We know that we are Black. We know that we are pushing against these same systems. And we know that we all won't be free, like one can't be free without us all being free. And I think this other piece is this myth around this false battle between Black trans women and Black cis women. There is nothing we're fighting for except making sure that our hair does not fall in this humidity, making sure that our skin stays supple, and making sure that we have a good coin in our purse. We are not fighting for these Negroes, I promise you. You can have them back, right? We're fighting for freedom, and we know that we will not get there alone. And we have all grown up watching our mothers and aunties and cousins fight and wonder, well, how do they get ahead? And I think now I'm thankful for SisterSong. I'm thankful for your leadership. We're able to radically show how we are linked and then establish a plan that gets us further down that journey to freedom.
I really appreciate that, Dominque. And Jamilah, I'm going to come to you really quickly because we're in a culture moment. Some would say that there's a culture war going on. Like there's so many battles. I mean, they not like us. I mean, there's just so much going on where the culture is at odds, right? But we're also in a cultural moment where we are seeing the conversations around sexual assault. The stigma of sex and sexuality is just seeping through in so many ways. So as a writer and cultural critic, a mother, and so much more, we know that you have a very interesting point culturally where the themes are really, where you're doing the work to help us understand all the things coming together. So as we're reckoning with what's happening in hip hop, the attacks on the rights of people to give birth, and so much more, how does motherhood influence your lens, which you critique? and why do you feel like that's really important to like really centralize in this moment as we're talking about what's happening as a culture?
I am raising a free Black girl. That is my duty. That is my responsibility to her. I want the world to be better for her than it was for me, than it was for my mother, than it was for my grandmother, you know? So it's important that we're having difficult conversations. My daughter's 11 years old. We've talked about Diddy. We've talked about Drake. You know, we've talked about Bill Cosby. Like, we've talked about the attack on reproductive rights. I don't hide those things from her, because the world is not going to hide them from her, right? And so it's better that it's coming from me. But in terms of informing my work, I'm passionate because I want to free her. I don't want her to deal with the amount of sexual assault that myself and most of the women in my peer group had to deal with just coming up. You know, I don't want her to deal with the street harassment. I want her to be able to make choices about her body. So I'm fighting for her. I'm fighting for all of our daughters and our sons.
Yeah. And I feel like I just want to follow up with one other thing, because you mentioned like so much of what's coming up in culture with like Diddy and all of those things. And how, if you could just give us a small snippet of like, how should we be talking about this? Like, you're having these conversations with your daughter, but what is some of the language and what are some of the things that we can do? Is there a tactic, right? Because I feel like right now we just have this open book of just like, it's here. What do we do? And we're using these hashtags. But are there specific ways that you can encourage people around having those conversations in this moment?
We have to deal with the fact that people are complicated, because there's so much focus on like, oh, but Diddy's legacy, what he contributed to the culture, he means so much. Oh, Bill Cosby's legacy. And we have to reconcile that people that are capable of greatness, people who have shifted and changed culture, are also capable of being predators, are capable of using the power that was given to them because of their cultural impact to do harm. And we can talk about all of those things. But at this moment, when it comes to someone like Diddy, what we need to focus on is the harm.
I really, really appreciate you for like really zoning in on that. Kendrick, I'm going to come to you really quickly because you've had great success playing a range of actors. You know, we love you for so many things that you're doing and the upcoming work that you're doing. But you yourself you are an engaged activist, right? Really working every single day on the front lines, from George Floyd to encouraging voter registration and to founding Bold Power in 2019. So Black men's voices are critical in these conversations, but can be in spaces, but they can be sparse, I should say, right? And we're really grappling with how to get more men into this conversation. So my question for you is, how can we amplify more Black male voices in these conversations around justice, sex, culture, and the re-education that we're really wanting to focus on?
Well, I mean, first, the voices got to be out there, and we got to identify them. Because I ain't gonna lie, ain't a whole lot of them that I've seen. But you know, building on what Jamilah was saying, I think it's not even just that you can have a legacy and be abusive and a predator. It's that America actually awards abusers and predators. Like every industry, capitalism, Hollywood awards, and you have to be abusive to go and rise up through the abusive system, because you have to accept abusive ways and learn how to manage them. You know what I'm saying? So it's actually a system that rewards abusers. So the people that they lift up to be how does she put it? In order to meet the material needs of Black people, you would have to upend capitalism. And so we settle for hyper-representation, hyper-visibility instead. So Black faces in high places. But many times, those Black faces had to go through all of this abuse and picked up abusive ways along the way, because they separate you from your community.
That's
and
so
say
important.
it's
That's
hard
so important to hear.
They say it's, you know, you can't take everybody with you. It's lonely at the top, you know, and Hollywood invented this idea, this archetype of the Hollywood hero being this white man, you know, who is abusive. You know what I'm saying? Yeah. Who might kill some people along the way, but it's okay. They're a hero. You know, they might destroy some buildings. You know what I'm saying? So I think we need to reframe for Black men, for men in general, who the heroes really are.
That's it.
You get what I'm saying? Who the leaders really are, who the keepers of the culture are. That's it. And how we protect them. And I think we need to shift our cultures behind closed doors, and you know what I'm saying?
That's real.
And identify men who are willing to have, like you said, who are complex, but are willing to have that conversation in a very honest way and be open to accountability.
Yeah.
Because I'm not going to make it. I might get up here and say something wrong today. Yeah. If somebody, the way my community works, they're going to pull me to the side and be like,
have to get you together,
listen, nigga, this is, hold on now.
We're going to have to get you together.
And I'm going to have to be like, okay, all right, you're right. How we do that better?
That's right. That's right.
Absolutely.
So, you know, I think that's so important. Y'all catching these gems, right? Y'all catching all this? So the purpose today was to really talk about the need and the urgency of a Black re-sex education campaign, something that really brings us together as the masses. And that is something that SisterSong is really invested in doing in partnership with all of these people here, and all of you really being in partnership with us and making it come to fruition. But DeWanda, I want to give you the last words on the panel today, because you definitely have played some iconic roles, and you're also blending in your activism around wellness in particular. And so can you help us understand, like, how do we do this in a way that allows us to bring our whole selves? Because you're really giving us an example of what that looks like. And why do you feel that's so important as we think about this conversation topic right now?
I think it's exactly what Kendrick was alluding to, which is the sometimes, you know, lonely battle of dismantling what it means to walk in integrity, to walk in your purpose, to like actually create new systems of being, ways of being, leadership, you know, how you operate with your teams, and ideally like moving through the world in every single space you're in. Like not doing that thing where you're being compartmental. Like America has definitely conditioned us to be like, well, here I'm this person and here I'm this person. But truly bringing your full self to every space you're in, and thereby giving everyone permission to do the exact same thing. To be like, hey, you're safe here. You're safe here. You can say what you need to say to me, and I'm not going to be punitive. You can be who you need to be. You know what I mean? And that's what I'm trying to do, who I'm trying to be, how I'm trying to live, both in my actual, like, personal, you know, little Northeast, live in the forest community, and in Hollywood at large when I bother to go back to Hollywood.
Oh my gosh. Can we please give it up for this amazing panel, y'all? I want you to make sure, if you want to find out more about all these people, make sure you're following them in the powerful work that they're doing. If you want to know more about reproductive justice, our booth is right here in the GBEF section. Please go check out SisterSong's Trust Black Women exhibit. And if you want to get more directly connected to the reproductive justice work and the sexual freedom work, please follow us on all things at sistersong.net and join us for our national Let's Talk About Sex conference. It's the largest space where Black folks come together to talk about the things that mean the most to us in August in Washington, D.C. We love you all. Thank you all so much.